I want to thank everyone for joining us for our third session during our two-day virtual event, Next in Finance, Innovation Through Automation. And our third session of the day is going to be Fuel Your Team's Growth with Top Finance Talent. I would note that this webinar, as well as our overarching two-day event, are brought to you by Bill, a leading financial operations platform for small and mid-sized businesses. Let me tell you a little more information. As a champion of SMBs, we are automating the future of finance so businesses can thrive. Our integrated platform helps businesses to more efficiently control their payables, receivables, and spend and expense management. Hundreds of thousands of businesses rely on Bill's proprietary member network of millions to pay or get paid faster. Headquartered in San Jose, California, Bill is a trusted partner of leading U.S. financial institutions, accounting firms, and accounting software providers, and we invite you to visit Bill.com for more information after this webinar, after this event. I'm Joe Fleischer. I'm thrilled to serve as your moderator. Before we launch into our first poll, I want to take a moment to introduce our distinguished guests, or give our distinguished guests the opportunity to introduce themselves. So from Bill, we have Will, aptly named, my colleague Will. We also have Payton and Matt. And so before we get started, Will, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and then Payton, and then Matt, and then we'll pose our first poll and then launch into our discussion. So starting with you, Will, and then Payton, and then Matt.
Great, thanks, Joe. Hi everyone. As Joe said, I'm Will Brunaw. I lead the talent function here at Bill. I've been in TA and recruiting for almost 30 years. I've had an opportunity to work for Bill for the last 4 years, and prior to that, worked at some larger companies like DocuSign, Amazon, leading some of their recruiting functions. So really glad to be here today. Thank you all for joining, and looking forward to the dialogue. All right, Payton?
Yeah, thank you, Will, and thank you, Joe. Great to be here. Again, my name is Payton Simmons. I'm the Executive Vice President of the North American business here at 10th Revolution Group. So I've been with our organization for just shy of 14 years in a number of different capacities. But what we do is we're the global leader in solving the technology skills gap. So our organization identifies places, trains and works on retention strategies with our customers, from SMB all the way up to enterprise organizations. So super excited to be here, and hopefully I can share some knowledge that I've gained that benefits everybody on this webinar.
All right, and I think that leaves me, and my name is Matt Grove. I am with Recruiting Toolbox. I'm a principal consultant. I've been with Recruiting Toolbox now for just under 12 years, and prior to that, I was in recruiting leadership for one of the big four accounting consulting firms, KPMG. So with Recruiting Toolbox, we focus on helping companies recruit and hire better. So we do a lot of strategy process kind of consulting, as well as a lot of customized training for recruiters, recruiting leaders, as well as hiring managers and interviewers. And it's good to be with you.
Well, we're so happy to have you. And before we launch into our discussion, let's pose the first of our 4 polling questions. And what we want to find out from attendees: how likely are you to hire new talent in the near future? Well, what you're welcome to do is select the answer that you see here, or select an answer from among those that you see here. There's no submit button, by the way. So all you have to do is select an answer, one of 3. So we've listed 3 options in response to the question: how likely are you to hire new talent in the near future? From top to bottom, the choices are: we're currently looking to hire new talent, we'd love to add new talent, but it isn't on the roadmap, or we're operating successfully, the team we have, with no plans to hire. You can feel free to select the choice that applies to your organization, specifically with regard to hiring new talent. We want to make sure attendees have sufficient time to respond. As you can see, we're revealing how you have responded. And interestingly enough, I'd say, so right now, taking the lead, many respondents so far perceive that they're operating successfully with the teams that they have, with no plans to hire. But a not too distant second, actually, is we'd love to add new talent, but it isn't on the roadmap right now. I think that's interesting, and perhaps there might be some additional explanations rather under the surface. And one of our goals today is to bring to the surface perhaps what underlies answers to this question. Again, we want to make sure attendees have sufficient time to respond, but we also want to make sure that we can guide you on the best practices with regard to attracting and retaining new finance talent, or retaining finance talent. So, with that in mind, what I would like to do is begin our discussion, and in particular, what I would like to do. I know that Will, you have interesting perspective with regard to some research, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about the findings of the research and their implications, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, as Joe was saying, we looked at a survey that was provided by Avalara. And there was quite a bit of interesting facts, but the three main things that stood out to me as I was looking at this is 76% of CFOs feel that there's a talent shortage. And there's various reasons, but two that really kind of jumped out at me as I was looking at this research was people are burned out, and people are also starting to make some career shifts. And I think that's going to continue to pick up as the market grows as well. The other thing was that 49% of CFOs really feel the need for financial planning and analysis expertise. So there's that skills gap component that's in the market today. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can go about attracting and retaining that talent. And then 63% of the CFOs believe that there's a lack of experience with financial talent. So they're not getting the level of expertise that they need in order to do the jobs. And so some of the things that they were talking about in the research was they're going to start to look at AI to automate some of these mundane tasks. That frees up their staff to do other things that are more meaningful. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how does the process start. So one of the biggest things that you can do is you can create a really positive candidate experience. That begins with your online presence, whether that's posting content, whether that's job postings. That's the entryway into finding the roles for your company. And that goes through all the way for an offer. I'll give you some examples. We compete with a lot of larger companies. We compete with the FANG companies. And I can't tell you how many times we have been talking to candidates that had offers from those companies, and they said, I'm going to take the Bill offer because of the candidate experience, the interview experience, and the culture, even though our offer may not be quite as robust as some of those. So this stuff really matters to how you think about hiring and creating that experience. So really making your job opportunities and your company information easy to find. I will say, a lot of candidates are applying for jobs via mobile apps. So making sure you've got it mobile enabled, that's certainly going to help with that speed of application. Making it easier on candidates. So making sure they're having virtual interviews. This is great for businesses, and we've seen the results here at Bill, and it's been a really positive outcome from COVID. It's a lot cheaper to do virtual interviews. You can get candidates faster, and you can really create almost as good of a candidate experience in terms of how that works. The other thing is speed matters. So when you're talking to candidates, making sure that you're scheduling them in a timely manner, you're following up, you're communicating, and so that really is creates a competitive advantage in hiring talent. So Matt, I know you and I talked a little bit about this, and I'd love to get your point of view here.
Absolutely. So I think there's a few things, right, where we have, as you talked about, these searchable elements. We're making it easy for candidates to apply. We're making it easy for them to interview with us virtually. All those things are really critical. Another area that we see that often goes kind of unprepared is the actual people doing the interviews, right? Have they gone and looked at those elements of what a candidate sees? Are they in tune with what we're putting out there, whether it be case studies or examples of our work, things like that. And I think making sure that we've got those people on our team already really aligned about what it means to create a great candidate experience. Even if the person that we're interviewing doesn't get the job with us, what do we want them to think about our company? How do we want them to consider us and our brand and our name in the future? And so getting people aligned is really critical. We do a lot of hiring manager and interview training just as part of our work. And it's amazing how many interviewers and hiring managers report to us that they build an interview panel the day of. They kind of look around the office and they say who's available instead of saying, let's be really intentional, right? Let's be really deliberate. And when you're talking about attracting top talent on this, I think one of the things that's really important to think about here is that top talent really demands that we have a really well-organized, well-aligned process so that candidate experience feeds all the way through. And so some of the ways that we're seeing our clients move around this is they're doing things like kind of getting away from some of the pedigree type things that they used to do. Like, you must have a finance degree from one of these 5 schools or we're not interested, right? They're moving much more towards skills-based hiring. They're also doing a lot more discussion and planning with their teams around how are we actually evaluating soft skills? Rather than just saying, hey, Will, are you adaptable? Like, let's see if you might be good working here. Do we actually have real ways of assessing adaptability or other soft skills that we value? And then ultimately, we can layer in all kinds of situational exercises into these interviews that enable you to see how proficient is someone with technology? What kind of analysis capabilities do they have? We can actually do those things in the moment during the interviews rather than just kind of making that assessment from a resume only. Well, if they went to this school or came out of this program or worked for this company, then they must be good at this, right? We're getting out of the assumption business. And I think especially as we think about more and more AI automation, as we'll talk about in a little bit, I think it is really important to think about the fact that business solutions going forward, it's not so much about do we have the knowledge, it's much more about how does this person apply the knowledge to a real business problem and solve it, right? And so we need to, I think, really rethink our interviews on that. At the same time, we need to be selling during those interactions so that candidates can say, oh, I can see myself here. This would be a career for me, not just a job. Or there would be amazing opportunities to work on these types of projects here. But the only way those candidates learn that is by what they see before they meet us and how they feel during those interactions as well.
That's great, Matt. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we see this from a lot of candidates where one of the biggest questions we get is what are my growth opportunities? The other thing I think that's really important is where do you go to find these candidates? Looking at different avenues. Some may be non-traditional. Obviously you've got the regular ones like LinkedIn and on campus, but professional associations and events and certain niche job boards are a great place to find that talent as well. And then I think the idea too is just throughout that process really continuing to push content to those candidates to help educate them, to help get them comfortable with the opportunity, the business strategy, the growth potential, not only for the business, but also for their role over the long term. So I would agree with that, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Will and Matt. We're going to start talking about a different consideration. And before we do, I want to pose now our second of 4 polling questions. And our second polling question asks attendees to indicate what level of comfort does your team have with implementing an artificial intelligence framework? We briefly alluded to artificial intelligence. As with our first poll, what you're welcome to do is select your choice. There's no submit button. Just feel free to select your choice from top to bottom. The choices are: we already have one in place and it's working for us. We already have one in place, but it's causing friction. We want to implement, we want and plan to implement one within the next 12 months. We want to implement, but there's fear that AI will make some jobs redundant or if you're unsure. And actually, what's interesting here is that a plurality have indicated that you are unsure. We appreciate the candor there. And I think that makes sense. You know what? I think that makes sense. And in fact, that's why you're here. So I want to give attendees sufficient time to respond. I also want to acknowledge that although the predominating response is unsure, a somewhat distant second is we want to implement and plan to do so within 12 months. I think what we need to do, our job here during this webinar, is to clarify what we mean by applying artificial intelligence in this particular context, and perhaps also reducing the percentage who are unsure because you have an idea of how one can apply artificial intelligence in this context. So I want to leave this question up just for maybe 2 more seconds, and then what we're going to do is continue our discussion, and in particular, what I think we need to do now is talk about maintaining a strong people culture in the age of AI. And what we're going to do is when we discuss or establish maintaining a strong people culture in the age of AI, Payton, I'd love to hear your perspective, and then Will, I think that you have something valuable to share here about implementing and sustaining an AI framework in the context with which we're having our conversation. So Payton, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. The survey that was there previously was really interesting, but also I think really indicative of the general feelings out there. With our organization, we're speaking to thousands of companies across our teams on a weekly basis, and fundamentally that's the challenge that we're trying to solve at the moment. And speaking to organizations on varying levels of their journey, and I think one of the toughest parts about AI and how do we get started is that there's so much content being pushed at you from every angle all the time. Is that it can get confusing, right? There's not a clear-cut way to leverage AI, right? It all depends on the outcomes you're seeking as an organization and how influential you want that to be. But we have seen some really clear points that make it a heck of a lot easier, right, to get going. And some of those keys to implementing and sustaining a successful AI framework is to keep people involved, right, and very much to bring them on the journey with you, as it's new for employees, right? It's also new for organizations. So being clear about the expectations of what you would like what you would like AI to do for you, but also what your expected outcomes are, and how that's going to impact the organization. Developing a thoughtful, people-focused AI implementation plan. Again, AI should be brought in to help replicate and in many cases replace the mundane tasks that typically people don't enjoy doing, right? Communicate regularly and often. I'm always a strong believer that you can never over communicate something, but you can surely under communicate, and allow people to play active roles in the framework governance and maintenance, right? And constantly taking on feedback and opinions and how's it going, understanding, right, that it might be a little bit bumpy out of the gates. But Will, I'll hand it over to you if you've got some more practical insights.
Yeah, Payton, thank you for that. And completely agree. I think, bringing people along on your AI journey, things like encouraging experimentation with new products or with things like ChatGPT, giving support to those early adopters as they start to kind of, again, play around with things, see what they can do. We've got, there's a lot of use cases for AI in the TA space or the talent acquisition space, and it's absolutely changing how we engage, identify, and recruit and hire talent, both on the candidate side, but also on the talent acquisition side. I mean, there are products out there, and we're starting to see more and more of this, where candidates will take your job description, upload it, and have it customize their resume for that job description. Or they're using AI products and tool to mass apply to thousands of jobs which we've seen that as something that's really bogging our recruiters down to have to go through those. And so you also have to look at some other areas where people misrepresenting themselves and being aware of that. There's a lot of ways that people can work around the system. And so being cognizant of that. And then from a recruiter standpoint and how we're using it, our recruiters use this to really kind of remove some of those, as Peyton said, some of those mundane tasks. In the past, recruiters would have to go out, do research, help put together a job description. Now they go into ChatGPT, they create a job description. It allows them more time to interact with the candidates and the people they're helping to recruit for. So that's creating that relationship. And they're also using it to, once they get the job description, going back to the interviewers. Matt talked about the importance of selecting the right interviewers. And the key to that also is asking the right questions so that you can determine, is this person right for the job? And so taking job descriptions and inputs and using that to create interview questions that are aligned to that. So years ago, I remember had a company having libraries of interview questions. You had to wade through it. That is going by the wayside. And again, so the main point here is encourage your team, whether it's in talent acquisition or in other roles, to experiment, to try new things, kind of create that freedom. Peyton, I know you've got a point of view on that in particular.
Yeah, and it's a really good point that you made there as well, right? Back to the relationship side of things, right? It's very much through the recruitment, the attraction and the recruitment process, but very much so on the retention side as well. And similar for our teams here, right? It's allowing our people to be far more informed in a much faster way. You mentioned feedback, right? That's one of the pieces of the recruitment process that slows things down most commonly, and it allows you to streamline that very, very quickly and effectively, and it changes the game on the candidate's experience. And then there's the obvious practical ones in practice within role functions. You mentioned encouragement, right? And that's the key, right? I think the biggest hurdle that most organizations have to overcome is the fear of what AI is going to do within that organization, and the fear of it replacing roles and replacing jobs and skill sets. But again, the reality of it is that it allows people to do their jobs far more effectively. It eliminates a number of the mundane, task-oriented pieces of the role, right? It automates that and puts people into position to spend more time on the relationship side, right, or the more decision-oriented part of the job. And the more and more that you can trial and push and encourage that those tools are being used, the better feedback that you get, right? But also it brings individuals along that journey, right? It was a small snippet from one of the many surveys that Gartner does, right? But they're saying that this forced freedom, right, increases the likelihood that employees will recognize the personal benefit from AI, by time and a half. So it's really interesting, and it's like with any new technology, right? Is that you're almost out of the gates an objector to it, right? And you have to force yourself and push yourself to try it and mess around with it. And then you start to see some of the small benefits, and then that compounds into, I wonder if I could do this, and I wonder if this would help me do, go from X to Y to X. And it really does, but you have to give the nudge to people to make that happen. So I think we've experienced that with any technological advance, right? This one just seems so extreme because it's being touted as the biggest thing that's happened to technology, in 20, 30 years.
Yeah, and Peyton, I'm sorry, Joe. I just wanted to add one more thing, if I could. And this is really about, I think candidates are really looking for the vision here too. What is your vision of using AI and automation for this role? What is that like? And so again, when you're kind of tying that, how do we do candidate attraction along with this AI automation piece? as leadership, what is it we've decided for our finance groups and our finance departments to say, this is how we want AI to work. This is what we see as the future of work at our company. And I think ultimately then that becomes a message, that becomes a sell, as Will called out before. You can have, you can compete with much larger entities in many cases when there's a clear vision that you can articulate around it. And so this is an area where we're seeing a few companies start to do that. But I think there's a golden opportunity here, especially for small businesses.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Matt. And of course, Peyton and Will, appreciate your perspective regarding AI. Now, it is well known that there is a finance and accounting shortage. Not clear how long that will last, but it is definitely with us. And this prompts us to pose our third polling question. And what we want to find out is in what areas are you aiming to improve talent management efforts? With this question, you're welcome to select all choices that apply. Again, there's no submit button, so you can feel free to select the choice or choices that correspond to your answer. From top to bottom, the choices are attracting top talent, improving company culture, offering professional development, retaining top talent, cannot emphasize that enough, or others. So feel free to select the choice or choices that correspond to your answer. And actually, with regard to other, what you can do separately, you see the Q&A area on the right side of your console. If you want to specify what that other is, you're certainly welcome to do so. The choices from top to bottom are attracting top talent, as well as improving company culture, offering professional development, or retaining top talent, or other. So again, these are the choices. You can select any of these choices, one or more of them. In addition, if you want to, what you're welcome to do in the Q&A area of your console is elaborate further if other is among your choices. So just want to make that clear. Now, before we continue our discussion, I just want to look at the results here. So we see that a top priority among respondents to our third of four polling questions is retaining top talent. So that is far and away the top priority. A not too distant second, attracting top talent. And indeed, in many organizations, that is the challenge. It's retaining and attracting. The two often go hand in hand, but often retaining top talent is a challenge. It's a huge challenge if we're talking about a shortage to begin with in the field of finance and accounting. So it is in this context that I would like to continue our discussion and when we talk about retaining talent being a top priority, there are things we can do to develop talent, finance talents in particular, to increase the likelihood, number one, that those who are with us stay. Number two, they have good things to say and try to bring other talented finance people into the organization. So, Will, let me turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thanks, Joe. It was good to see that the top one was retention, because the easiest person to recruit in your company are the people that are already there. So retaining that talent, constantly engaging them, having stay conversations, helping create those career opportunities is critical. And so, 86% of professionals said they would change jobs if a company offered them more opportunity. And I think that's right. And we're going to continue to see that in the marketplace, especially for finance and accounting talent, which is already very scarce now. And so when you're thinking about the retention, the usual suspects are you focus on the compensation, the benefits, the job flexibility. It's still incredibly important, but most professionals want the development. And if you look at the study that Harvard Business Review did, it said that actually professional development and growth leads to higher levels of engagement and retention. And it's not necessarily a promotion. It's giving people an opportunity to flex into different roles and to stretch, to learn new things, to pick up new skills. And so part of that is really embedding learning into everything with your employees. So the onboarding process, looking for opportunities or looking at creating opportunities for folks. And then even providing things like coaching and mentoring, whether that's formal or informal, all of those certainly have a positive impact on retention. With current employees, you really want to retain those individuals. They have valuable institutional knowledge. They're already engaged. They're already contributing to the business. They've got a rapport with coworkers, partners, and they can adopt to roles in many cases a lot faster because they've already learned the culture, they know the company, and they can stretch into those roles. Not to mention, there is a huge cost of attrition when your talent walks out the door. That institutional knowledge leaves, and those relationships and efficiencies of how you work and how they get things done also leaves. It's much faster to take a current employee and ramp them into a new role to productivity than it is the time that it would take to go out and source somebody, get them through an interview process, hire them, and then ramp them up. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about retaining the existing talent through other opportunities?
Absolutely. So one of the big opportunity areas that we see is when employees are given opportunities for things like, like career coaching and professional development, right? Where it's not only reserved for certain levels and above, for instance. So I know, for years and years and years, we've always in organizations done a really good job of identifying high potential folks who are on an executive path kind of things and being able to provide them some of these kinds of resources. The expectation from a lot of employees now is much more around, I'd like to have that kind of development opportunity, that type of coaching, regardless of my level, regardless of where I am in the organization. And we're seeing more and more where our clients are doing things like doing much more involved career pathing. What does it look like to join our organization at level X? And then what do your next 3 to 5 to 7 years here look like? And when people have that clear path, again, they're finding that they're just much more excited and invigorated to be there and to stay there. One of the things that for us on the recruiting side, we find is that when people pursue an internal opportunity and don't get it, for whatever reason, their next move is often to seek out an external opportunity, to actually look to leave the organization. But if they can find that next opportunity within the organization itself, it is an amazing way to promote retention. A few things I think that are helpful is to look at your own review process when you're doing your quarterly or annual reviews with your employees. Are you giving opportunities for those employees to say, I would like to try something else, or I would like to learn something else? And if so, where is that documented and how does that get referenced when those opportunities arise? And then ultimately, do we have this kind of true feedback loop where people are getting honest, clear, meaningful feedback around their performance and not just being told whether they're meeting the bar, exceeding the bar, but actually being given clear focus areas to say, and if you want to achieve this next piece in your career, here are the 2 or 3 things that we think you should focus on next, and helping people identify those and then really be able to live into those within the organization itself. There's one other kind of aspect of this that I think is worth just noting as well. Many companies don't have a clear promotion of internal opportunities. And that's something else that I think as leaders, we should be thinking about. How do we reward our managers and our senior management who actually promote for people to move around within the organization? Do we reward leaders who do that? Do we create opportunities for people to be successful when we do that? Those of whom we see doing that are achieving much better retention rates that we see over and over.
Well, that's a really key point, because there's often this notion that attracting and retaining are separate, and actually they overlap. In other words, the very efforts that an organization makes to retain finance talent often are applicable to attracting and vice versa. So, I think that's a really key point, and perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later. In the meantime, what I would like to do is pose our last polling question, and then we do have some time to address some great questions from attendees. But I do want to say that we've already had quite a robust discussion already. That said, let's pose our last polling question to attendees. And what this question is going to ask is, do you feel like you have technology tools and software to attract new talent? Now, we did talk about artificial intelligence. We're going to broaden this a bit. And what we want attendees to do is select a choice. You don't have to click on a submit button. From top to bottom, the choices are in response to the question, do you feel like you have technology tools and software to attract new talent? Top to bottom, the choices are our employees use and love our tools and software. No, but we plan to adopt new tools to help attract and retain talent, or we have some technology but would benefit from adopting more. What you're welcome to do is select the choice that corresponds to your answer. You do not have to click on a submit button. Now, what we're seeing is that a significant percentage, and indeed once again a plurality in this case, have indicated that you have some technology but would benefit from adopting more. That's way out in front, not too distant second. Yes, our employees use and love our tools and software. I'm not surprised to see that many organizations have some technology but would benefit from adopting more. I want to leave this question up so that attendees have sufficient time to respond to this poll. And then what we're going to do is address some great comments and questions from attendees. And the attendee writes that we do utilize artificial intelligence within our accounting software for identifying outliers, but we are unsure of what else or where else we could implement artificial intelligence. So that is a comment, but I also think there's a question here. Where else can we apply artificial intelligence? Again, in the context of our discussion, and perhaps what we can do, maybe I'll turn the floor over first to you, Will, and then Payton, and then Matt.
Thanks, Joe. Great question. I think a lot of companies and departments are trying to figure that out in terms of how do they use it. I think the first thing is, again, it goes back to identifying some of those tasks and identifying some of those things that are relatively transactional or administrative first, and then looking at what are some use cases to leverage AI. I think it's things like, again, you have to constantly be looking for that. I think it's even engaging with peers or other companies to understand what they're doing. So even looking at external resources. So I think it's really just I think that's the first step. And then I think it's again experimenting with those tools and just trying things. Just seeing how it might help and it might be used. Sometimes it's going to work, and other times it's not going to work, and that's okay. And so continuing to iterate on that as you go on your journey. Payton, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, very, very similar. I think that those use cases start to grow pretty dramatically as you start trialing and testing those, right? You start figuring out things that you didn't know existed, right? Or ways to use the technology that you didn't know existed. But trying to think about it really plainly and practically is that if you think about writing a job description for a role function, I think if you go look at any of those job descriptions today that would be posted, you're going to find a couple of bullet points in there that are super task oriented, right? That if you had the opportunity to not use somebody's time to do those tasks and therefore apply it to something that's more critical to the business, right? That requires far more human interaction and thought process behind it. You can quickly start to identify some areas that you can apply this. AI is it's still such a general term, right? It doesn't mean just one specific thing. There's thousands of third-party tools, right? That you can bolt on and put on top of the current platforms and systems that you have. But it very much does come down to trying to key in onto a couple of those processes that you'd like to speed up and automate, and quite frankly, take off the plates of some of your most skilled employees and leverage their leverage their expertise in very different ways.
Yeah, and I would say the areas that we tend to see happening first are things like different efforts around risk management, also some different efforts around strategic planning. Is there a way to take some sort of forecasting, scenario modeling pieces that have been very manual or very labor intensive, and making those happen very quickly utilizing AI? So those are some areas where we're seeing kind of the more deep dive stuff right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a question from an attendee, Payden, directed to you. But you know what? I think we could probably pose this question to everyone. Maybe we'll start with you, Payden, and then Matt, and then Will. So starting with Payden, and then Matt, and then Will. An attendee writes, how can I open up a dialogue with my team to dispel fear or concern about using AI with regard to attracting and retaining finance talent?
That's a great question. I get similar ones with my team on a regular basis, and nobody ever likes the answer that I give, because it's always the obvious one, right? I think you just have to put the fish on the table, right? Figurative fish on the table, and start talking about it. I think as a leader or somebody that's hoping to foster that discussion, I think it's also about educating yourself, right? So you're coming with a point of view, but trying to gather and get as much feedback that some's going to be positive and some's going to be negative, right? And certainly if there's a fear underneath that, but I think we also, a lot of times we probably over embellish what we think that fear actually is, and just quite simply pushing that conversation and opening that up and trying to create that figurative safe space to get that feedback is really important. So I think just giving it a shot right to start, and because if you don't, then you don't really know where people stand on it, and you don't know what problems you're actually trying to fix or what fear you're trying to overcome. So, in a lot of cases, the simplest way forward is the most obvious answer, and it's just trying to create that platform to simply have the discussions for a start. But Matt, I don't know through your work if you're seeing anything different or have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's probably just very related to what you just shared, Payden. It's very much more around involving the team, as was called out earlier in this session. Really important that people feel like they have a voice, that they are part of the plan, not that the plan is just happening to them. I also see a fairly high adoption rate when people can say, like, take an inventory of tasks that the team really doesn't enjoy doing or doesn't like doing or wish we could do in an hour instead of a day, and start by deploying some of these tools to alleviate those stress points, those repetitive work points. And so I think that's where people can start to get more comfort. I do hear in the focus group work that we do, which is fairly substantial year after year, we do hear a fair amount of fear from people saying, will I still have a job in 3 or 4 years? Especially people who are nearing retirement age. I hear this a lot as well. And so I think it's worth spending the time communicating. Payden, earlier you said it's probably impossible to over communicate. I agree with that. And I think it's really helping people understand the role of AI and the role of humans in your vision for the organization going forward. And my hope then is that people start to see that there's a place for them and a place for the tools. And hopefully they understand that it's a great time to be alive and a great time to be in your organization. Will, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys covered a lot of the bases. I think, definitely the importance of bringing people along. Again, it goes back to finding those tasks that people don't necessarily enjoy doing, and really looking at automating that. I think the other thing is there's a lot of companies that talk about wanting to use this technology for recruiting or other tasks, but they're unwilling to make the investment to take, and the investment just financially and in time to actually learn what might work, learn what doesn't work, learn, what you're willing to invest funds into, because some of these products, they're fantastic, and they're not that expensive in the scheme of things, considering the amount of transactional or kind of more manual work that they can eliminate in the process, right? And so again, I think it comes back to, people say you want it, but you're going to have to commit to it, and you're going to have to invest. You're going to have to give your teams time to learn it. One of the things that I would also suggest is there's always going to be early adopters for AI, for new technologies, for a new way of working. Leverage those early adopters to help spread the word. One of the things we've done here is we had a small group of recruiters that were really interested in exploring how do they use AI, and we gave them the time to step away from their day jobs, do some innovation work. They loved it because they were doing something that they hadn't had a chance to do. And then we gave them actual funding to buy some of the products, and it was a fairly insignificant amount of money to use and to try to see how that would work. And once that group got really comfortable with it, they went out and they evangelized the use of these tools. And that was really probably one of the biggest ways that we've been able to change behaviors, change that kind of that fear of using things. So again, I think that's a really great way to also start small and then just let it snowball effect.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for at least a few more questions from attendees. Now, many organizations face challenges not only with attracting talent in general, but finance talent in particular. I want to give each of you and I'll specify who in just a moment. I want to give each of you the opportunity. This is a separate topic from making the case for finance and accounting as a field. That's a whole other topic. But simply the matter of encouraging individuals to join a finance team or an FP&A team, financial planning and accounting team. So attendee asks, how does one effectively make the case to not only join an organization, but the finance function or finance team or finance functions within an organization? And what I think we can do, perhaps we'll return to you, Will, and then Peyton, and then Matt.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's always going to be people out there that are drawn to certain fields and certain jobs. And so I think the first step is being really clear about what the job is, being very intentional. Matt talked about this, like good job guides and just really understanding what you need and what you don't need. Because so many times you see a laundry list of things that you need for positions, and probably, a third of them aren't really particularly useful. You just put it on there. So I think being clear about that, and then working to really attract those individuals as a first step. But again, I think it still goes back to what can you offer them in terms of their career growth, in terms of their learning capabilities for a finance team. What exposure, I think the great thing about finance is you get a lot of exposure to different parts of the business. So really kind of selling that aspect, selling the fact that there's a ton of work. And I think there's also a lot of opportunities to move around within finance and accounting orgs. So yeah, I think those are sort of the high level things. But Matt, I know you spent a long time at KPMG, so would love to get your point of view.
Yeah, I would say, one of the big things is that connection to the business. I think that matters a lot. I know when I was with the big firm, there was a huge commitment. It wasn't so much that necessarily someone was really married to the idea of one kind of business transaction or another. It was the fact that they were really involved and felt passionate about being in client service and helping clients achieve great things. And so there were always, within that environment, very clear distinctions drawn between the work you do, the client impact. And so I think anytime you can tie you can kind of get out of selling, what are the features of the job, and you can actually sell a lot more about the impact of the work on those with whom you interact. I just think it's a more powerful sell overall. And I think about this too from very young generation people that I meet now. A lot of times that's the question on their mind that I hear over and over, which is, how will this matter? How does this matter in the world? And I think having that kind of framing is very powerful for people at any point in their career, because I think the days of somebody just either being a numbers person or not a numbers person or something are over. I can be a numbers person and be a software engineer. I can be a numbers person and be something else. So why this? And again, I come back to that business impact and that impact on even society as a whole, in some cases, depending on the work that somebody's going to be doing. Peyton, I don't know if you have a different kind of angle on it than that, maybe. But.
Not really. It's probably more so just in line with that. You mentioned this earlier, Matt, about the journey and being a part of something, and it's about adopting technology, but it's also about what journey is the team on? Is that group? Is that division on? People want to be part of something, right? They want to feel like they're contributing to something slightly bigger than just themselves or what their job is. And Will, you talked about retention. I know I'm kind of covering a couple different pieces here, but Will, you were talking about retention earlier. And if somebody's showing up every day just to do a job, right, that's the individual that will just leave for a little bit extra cash in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months time. Again, it goes back to that connection to what is the group, what is the division, what is the role here to impact, right? Because if it's just an isolated function and task, that doesn't get you very far, and it really, really hurts with retention. So, Matt, you talked about being intentional around some of these things, and I think that's absolutely critical, right? Regardless of the role that you're trying to hire for or keep in the organization.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and this is related to several things that have been mentioned already today, but Will, you talked a little bit earlier about this idea of like the questions we ask, right? One of the ways I think we really help people understand the exciting capabilities that they would have on this team in this role in finance is during interviews, using real work examples that people get to problem solve through, not using what I kind of consider randomized puzzle questions, right? It's not these questions like how many golf balls does it take to fill up a 747 or something. It's really saying, here are the challenges that our team is working through. Let's actually see you kind of do this problem solving on one of these challenges. And as candidates hear that, they start to not only solve the problem at hand, but they start to either be really impressed and eager to do the work, or not eager to do the work. And there's not really a middle ground, right? They either get kind of compelled, like, oh, I really find this interesting, or they kind of repel a little bit. And again, I think those are golden moments to show somebody what a career in finance could feel like, or what this kind of a role with our team would be like.
Yeah, and I think one more thing just to add is, really, as you're going through that interview process that Matt talked about, understanding what those individuals' motivators are, and then really positioning the job and the company to help support those motivators for that person that you're recruiting. So.
That's a really key point. Now, we have a lot of great questions. I want to acknowledge any questions we did not have the opportunity to address. We'll plan to follow up on after our webinar. Just a couple of things I just want to quickly mention. First of all, not during this webinar, but after this webinar, we will announce, or rather inform, the winner of the iPhone 16 with regard to the giveaway that you may have heard about. And the other thing I would note is that if you have any questions about terms and conditions concerning this particular promotion or other promotions throughout our 2-day Next in Finance virtual event, I invite you to visit the right side of your console. In the docs area, there's a link to click on terms and conditions, referring not only to this iPhone 16 giveaway, but other promotions as well. There's also a link to take you to a page if you're interested in scheduling a personalized demo with Bill. We're getting to the top of the hour. And so I did want to note a couple of other things before we wrap up. This QR code that you're seeing will also take you to that very same page that I just alluded to regarding requesting and scheduling a personalized demo with Bill. I want to, first of all, thank you, Peyton and Matt and Will, for sharing your perspective regarding attracting and retaining finance talent. It's not easy. It's especially challenging now, but there are things we can do, and I really appreciate your sharing each of your unique perspectives on this topic.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. Before we wrap up, I want to make attendees aware of a couple of things. As I mentioned, we'll plan to follow up on any questions we did not have the opportunity to address during our webinar. We will shortly display a feedback survey. As always, we appreciate your feedback. And then I also want to note that those of you who have attended our live webinar today for at least 50, that's 50 minutes, and answered at least 3 polling questions will be eligible to receive a certificate by email by the end of the week. And finally, I would note that we will make a recording, an edited recording of this webinar available next week. We will not provide access to the slides, I will acknowledge, but you will be able to view and listen to a recording, and we'll plan to make that available next week. Before we wrap up, as I mentioned, do want to make sure that attendees have the opportunity to share your feedback. As always, we appreciate it. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day.